They blocked her at the gate, until the general admitted she outranked every man there. Back it up, sweetheart. Access denied. The words cut through the morning air at Camp Ridgeway like a blade scraping across cold metal. Sergeant First Class Dale Hurst, 6'2", chest ribbons stacked 3 rows deep, biceps testing the seams of his uniform, planted himself in the middle of the gate lane with the posture of a man who had never been wrong about anything. Not once, not in 19 years. He stood with his arms crossed like he owned not just this gate, but the entire installation, the mountains rising behind it, and every person who had ever needed permission to pass through. She stopped the truck. She was 31. Medium height, dark hair pulled into a regulation bun without a single strand loose. She wore a contractor's temporary badge on a plain lanyard and a jacket 2 sizes too large for her frame. No rank insignia anywhere on her clothing. Nothing to say who she was or where she'd been. Her hands, resting on the wheel, were still. Completely still. The kind of stillness that comes from training the body not to answer emotions it didn't choose. 22 personnel were watching from the checkpoint area. Gate guards, motor pool staff, 2 officers from administration who'd stepped outside with coffee mugs. Morning processing on a Tuesday. Nothing special. Nothing that explained the tingling attention at the back of their necks. I said, back it up. Hurst stepped to her window. His shadow fell across her forearm through the glass. Contractor credentials expired 3 days ago. System flagged it. You don't come in. The access is current, she said. Someone keyed the wrong termination date. Someone. He repeated the word the way people repeat things when they want everyone around them to register how absurd the speaker is. He looked at his junior guard, Price, who offered a grin that meant, yeah, I'm watching. Tell me more. You want to step out of the vehicle, or are you going to keep telling me how to do my job, honey? She stepped out. She moved without hurry. There was a small notebook in her jacket pocket that she left in the jacket. She left her phone, too. She brought only her ID wallet, which she handed to Hurst without being asked. He looked at it the way a man looks at a parking ticket he's already decided to dispute. Morgan, K., he read aloud, performing for Price. Systems Analyst, Tier 3 contract. Ridgeway at support. He handed it back with 2 fingers. Tech support, girl. That makes sense. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that invites everyone else to join in. Several people did. Gates closed for non-essential personnel during the security review. Come back after 1300. I was notified of no security review. Well, he spread his hands. Theater, now you are. She looked at him for exactly 1 second. Her expression did not change. I'll wait, she said. She returned to her truck, in the motor pool canopy 60 feet away. A man named Chief Warrant Officer Terrence Bowman watched all of it from a folding chair he'd set up next to a dismantled engine block. He was 62 years old, 34 years in. His back hurt in ways a doctor had written words about that he'd stopped reading. He had a cup of coffee and a clipboard and a view of everything that happened at this gate from 0630 to 1000, which was when the sun got into his eyes and he moved the chair. He watched her park. He watched her fold her hands on the steering wheel. He watched her breathe. 4 counts in. Hold 4. 4 counts out. Hold 4. He recognized that pattern. He'd learned it at a school he'd been told didn't exist, taught by an instructor whose name he'd been told to forget. He set down the clipboard. He picked up his coffee. He watched her sit in that truck with the patience of a person who had done her waiting in places where impatience got people killed. Something about her. He couldn't place it, but it was there. The afternoon brought new indignities. After 1300, she was admitted, not because anyone had resolved the credential error, but because the shift supervisor checked the work order against the maintenance log and confirmed she'd been scheduled for weeks. Hurst had gone to lunch. The gate opened. She drove in without ceremony. But word travels on a base the way smoke travels, invisible, fast, through every crack. By the time she reached the building and set up at a workstation in the server room, the version of the story Hurst's gate had produced was already in 3 group chats and spreading. Some contractor chick tried to argue her way past Hurst, then tried to tell him he was wrong about her credentials. Then, apparently she threw some kind of attitude. The story grew in the retelling the way these stories always do. The small humiliation inflating itself into something more dramatic, more satisfying to repeat. She heard it at lunch. She sat alone in the corner of the commissary with a tray of food she barely tasted, eating with the mechanical efficiency of someone who treats nutrition as a supply problem. She listened, filed patterns. The master sergeant who laughed loudest was positioned closest to the colonel's administrative office. The corporal who said nothing was watching the master sergeant laugh. She noted who deferred to whom. She noted where real authority pooled beneath the surface of official rank. She was doing intelligence work. She appeared to be eating a disappointing sandwich. At 14:23, she was in the server corridor running a cable diagnostic when Hurst appeared with 2 of his morning witnesses and a man in a major's uniform she hadn't encountered yet. The major's name, she'd learned from the duty roster, was Calloway. He had the build and certainty of a man whose career had involved no serious resistance. "There she is," Hurst said. Not to her. To Calloway, like she was an exhibit. Calloway looked her over, her jacket, her lack of insignia, the cable in her hands. "This the contractor with the access issue?" he said. "Access issue." Hurst grinned. "That's one way to describe it." "I'll need to see your authentication credentials," Calloway said. "Not the badge. System credentials. For the server you're on." She entered the monthly authentication code without breaking her grip on the cable. 14 characters, 2 special strings, a rotating 4th element most operators looked up on a printed card. She had it from memory. She entered it in under 10 seconds. Calloway stared at the terminal. Most analysts took 4 to 6 minutes with the reference guide. Some of them took longer. "Where'd you get that code?" he said. "From onboarding documentation." "That code isn't in onboarding documentation. Mine was." He was quiet for 3 seconds. "Then, I'm going to need you to come with me to verify." "Of course," she said. She set down the cable at a clean rest position. The kind of clean rest position you learn when the person teaching you explains that a cable left wrong causes 3 hours of diagnostic work for the next tech, and that is disrespectful to their time, and therefore to them. She straightened. She followed him. Bowman was in the corridor that connected the server wing to the administration hub. He was there to deliver a maintenance request he could have sent through the portal, but had printed and carried by hand. He saw her being walked through the corridor with Calloway and Hurst. He saw her posture, not tense, not performing calm, regulation straight. The way it's drilled until muscle memory overrides anything else, until the body doesn't know how to hold itself any other way because the training has replaced the original. He had only seen posture like that at one school, 3 times. All 3 men who'd come out of it were in his memory in particular ways, not because they were loud, but because they were precisely the opposite. He held the door open as they passed. She didn't look at him, but he saw her sleeve shift with the motion of holding her jacket closed, and the cuff pulled back, and there it was, just for a second, the edge of something on the inside of her left forearm. A mark. He didn't see the whole thing. He saw the lower arc of what would be, he was almost certain, a specific geometric border he had seen in exactly one place in 34 years of service. His jaw tightened. His blood ran cold. He watched them walk her around the corner. She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. The rhythm was automatic by now. She drilled it until it ran below the surface, until stress didn't touch it. The verification room was small. Concrete walls, a metal table, 2 chairs, a terminal. She was familiar with this kind of room. She sat in it the way you sit in familiar places. Calloway had her contractor file on the screen. Hurst stood by the door. He had stopped performing. This felt different to him now. Less like sport. More like something that might have consequences he couldn't yet calculate, which was making him revert to the posture of a man taking things seriously. Your clearance level lists Tier 3 contractor, Calloway said. Yes, but you had access to a Level 4 authentication string. The documentation I received included it. That's not how Level 4 strings are distributed. She said nothing. She answered only what was precisely required, and nothing more. The silence was not a gap. It was a structure. I'm going to need to flag this with the security office, Calloway said. Your access is suspended pending investigation. You'll need to surrender your badge. I understand, she said. She unclipped the badge. She set it on the table, not dropped, placed, precise and level. We'll also need your phone. Of course. She produced it, placed it beside the badge. Is there anything else on your person that provides facility access? She looked at him. Steady, no expression. No, she said. They didn't ask about the watch. Nobody ever asked about the watch. This is the near-fail moment. The point where anyone watching from the outside would think she's finished. Caught, credentials confiscated, investigation triggered, contained in a room the size of a walk-in closet with no signal and no badge. Game over. Except games have rules, and she's about to show them they've been playing the wrong game entirely. She looked at her watch. It was 15:47. In 19 minutes, she would miss her mandatory check-in with the system she'd logged into that morning at 063. That check-in was tied to a protocol she'd quietly activated during onboarding 3 months ago, the first time she'd understood exactly what was happening on this base and why she'd been sent here. The protocol didn't require her input once triggered. It required only her silence. In 41 minutes, an automated notification would push to a contact list she'd assembled and verified. The list had 7 names. 6 of them were in Washington. 1 was 200 miles east of here, at a facility whose existence wasn't in any public record. In approximately 2 hours, Major Calloway was going to learn the difference between the authority that appears on a badge and the authority that doesn't appear anywhere. She folded her hands. She breathed. 4 counts in, hold 4. 4 counts out, hold 4. She waited. The first crack came from the hallway. Bowman had spent 40 minutes writing a request he didn't need to write, in a hallway outside a room he had no official reason to be near, doing the arithmetic of 34 years against what he'd seen in a server corridor. He knew the mark on her forearm. He had seen it twice. Once on a man in a debriefing room that technically didn't exist, and once on a laminated card shown to him by a superior who had then taken the card back and said, "If you ever see this, Chief, you call me before you do anything else." Not after. Before, that superior had been a 2-star. He was now a 4-star. Bowman had his number in a phone he kept charged and backed up. He'd made the call 20 minutes ago. He was now standing, arms crossed, when Calloway came out for coffee. "I'd be careful with that one," Bowman said. "Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes people stop walking." Calloway looked at him. "The contractor? I wouldn't call her that again if I were you." "Chief, I know." Bowman picked up his coffee. "I'm just telling you, I'd be careful." Calloway's jaw tightened. He went for his coffee. He stood in the break room for 4 minutes telling himself Bowman was a tired old man who spent too much time with engines. And he almost believed it. Except that Bowman had 34 years and that kind of certainty in a voice that didn't raise itself. He went back to his desk. His computer had 7 new notifications. He stared at them. His face cycled through 3 different states in 4 seconds. None of them ones he would want a photograph of. They arrived at 1738. Not a security team. Not an MP escort. A black SUV with federal plates, followed by a second vehicle, followed by a third with a 4-star placard visible through the windshield. The SUVs pulled to the administration building with the quiet efficiency of vehicles that had never needed permission to go anywhere. 4 people got out of the first 2 vehicles, 3 in civilian clothes and federal credentials. 1 in a general's uniform that had more ribbons than the entire motor pool staff combined. Hurst was at the checkpoint when they passed. He clocked the placard. He did the calculation. Something in his chest made a sound like a very small thing falling from a very high place. Inside, Calloway met them at the entrance with the instinctive posture of a man who had just realized he was standing on the wrong side of something enormous. "Major Calloway," the general said. He did not introduce himself. He didn't need to. Everyone in the building knew his face. Brigadier General Paul Mathers, Deputy Director of Joint Operations, whose office was technically in the Pentagon but who moved between installations like weather. You didn't plan for his arrival. You simply found yourself in it. "You have someone in a holding room." "Sir, there was a credential discrepancy. Where is she?" Not a question. The room understood the difference. Calloway walked. The door to the verification room opened. She was sitting exactly where they'd left her. Hands folded, breathing even. She looked up when Mathers walked in, and something passed between them, not recognition in the social sense, more like the acknowledgement of 2 people whose paths have crossed in places that don't appear on maps. "Commander," he said. Calloway's head turned so fast it was almost audible. "Sir," she said. She stood, not with deference, with the automatic precision of a body that responds to rank the way instruments respond to calibration. "We good?" Mathers said. "We are now." One of the federal agents produced a document from a case. He set it on the table. It was sealed with a classification stamp, classified red, a level that Calloway had theoretical awareness of and had never in his career seen applied to physical paper in a room he was standing in. The top line bore her name. Not Morgan. K. A different name. Below it, her actual designation. Below that, a list of operational assignments that covered a period of 11 years in theaters that the major's clearance level did not permit him to read. The agent turned it so Calloway could see the top line and the designation. Only the top line. That was enough. Calloway's face went white, not pale. White, the kind that means blood has gone somewhere else. "She's been embedded on this installation for 4 months, Mathers said, not looking at Calloway, looking at her. "Active investigation. The people she's been building a case against, 3 of them are in this building right now." A pause, precise and deliberate, including the individual who initiated this afternoon's credential flag. Hurst was in the doorway. His mouth was open. Mathers looked at him. He didn't say anything to Hurst. He looked at him for 2 seconds and looked away. That was its own kind of consequence. I think there's something you want to show them, Mathers said to her. She pushed back her left sleeve. The tattoo covered the inside of her left forearm from wrist to mid-arm, a geometric border in navy blue, precise as a blueprint, enclosing a designation in a script used by exactly one unit in the United States military, a unit whose existence was classified at a level above the room they were standing in. Around that designation, in smaller markings, were the numerical codes of 6 operational theaters. An 11-year record, not decorative. Documentary, the federal agent nearest the door, made a sound that wasn't quite a word. The tablet in the administrative assistant's hands hit the floor. The clatter echoed through the corridor like a gunshot in the sudden quiet. The hum above them became the loudest thing in the building. A boot scuffed tile somewhere to her left. A chair scraped concrete in the outer room, where personnel had been clustering near the doorway since the SUVs arrived. Bowman was standing in the corridor. He had not been asked to come. He had simply walked here, because there are 34 years' worth of instincts, and sometimes they put you exactly where you need to be. He looked at the tattoo. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at her face. His hand moved. It moved the way a hand moves when the body decides something that the mind is still processing. Up, rigid, at the precise angle of formal military respect that he had performed 10,000 times, but had never in 34 years performed in a room like this one, to a person the rest of the room had spent 4 months treating as an inconvenience. He chose it. Not because she outranked him, because he knew what that mark meant. Because he'd spent 4 months watching someone work with the patience and discipline of a person who had been trusted with things that broke people less built for it. Because she'd sat in that truck this morning, breathing through it, and waited. He chose it. Then Mathers raised his hand. Then the 3 federal agents. Then the administrative staff in the corridor, one by one, in a cascade that moved through the building the way a current moves through water. Not loud, just present. Inevitable, 43 people. She counted. Not because she needed to, because she always counted. Calloway's hand came up last. It trembled slightly at the wrist. Not theatrical. Not performed. Just the involuntary signal of a body that was processing the gap between what it had believed 2 hours ago and what it knew now. He held the salute. His face was entirely still in the way that faces are still when they have run out of expressions. Hurst didn't raise his hand. He stood in the doorway with his arms at his sides and the specific look of a man watching his career perform its final act. 2 of the federal agents moved toward him with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this before. "You're going to want to step outside with these men, Sergeant," Mathers said. Hurst stepped outside. She watched him go without any particular expression. She was already thinking about the next phase. At 1900, she sat on the steps of a building at the east end of the installation. The sky over the mountains had gone from orange to deep purple, the kind of colors that have no function except to remind you that some things happen without anyone's permission. Her watch read 1902 in clean military digits. The base was quiet in the specific way it gets when something significant has occurred and personnel are still processing what they witnessed. She heard boots on gravel. Bowman settled onto the step beside her. He had a second cup of coffee. He didn't offer it to her. He just set it within reach and looked at the mountains. 34 years, he said after a while. And I never saw that mark in person. Most people haven't. How long were you in this one? 4 months on site. 11 months building the case. He nodded, drank his coffee. The 3 in the building, he said. 2 in custody. She paused, 1 cooperating. The 4th? A silence. The wind moved across the mountains and brought the smell of pine and something metallic and distant. "There's still a 4th, she said. She looked at her watch. 1909, somewhere out there, a surveillance image from 3 months ago, a rooftop in a city whose name she hadn't said aloud since the briefing. Someone had been watching. Someone had been watching her watch them. The image was grainy, thermal. The figure's face was obscured. But the profile was wrong for anyone on the current list, which meant the current list was incomplete, which meant the mission wasn't finished. The mission was never finished. They blocked her at the gate this morning. They forgot she had been the gate. For 11 months, she had been the single point through which every piece of intelligence about this network had passed. Built in secret, verified in shadow, delivered to people whose decisions would protect the kind of men and women who never got to sit on steps at dusk and hear the wind come off the mountains. She picked up the coffee he'd set beside her. Took 1 slow sip. Justice isn't loud, it's patient. She already knew where she was going next. She already knew the name she was building toward, piece by piece, rooftop by rooftop, until the picture was complete enough to act on. She would find the 4th. She always found them. Tomorrow brings new ghosts to hunt. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to MVP Stories for more.